Chagiga Daf begins with a Mishnah that lists 3 levels of how much source various halachas have in the Torah. It'll discuss 3 groups of halachos. One has no source in the Torah, one has very little source in the Torah, and one has a very robust source in the Torah. The Gemara will go through the first 2 categories, describing either what little source they have or why we say that it has no source. The Gemara will spell out in detail what the potential sources are. So let's begin the Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses 3 categories of halachos. The first is halachos which the Mishnah calls flying in the air. It has nothing to hang on. It has no source in the Torah specifically. The only item in this category is the rules of nidarim, specifically the rule that if someone makes a vow, a promise to do something, not to do something, he can get rid of that promise or vow, that neder or shvua, by asking for a heter from a chacham. That is, he can go to a chacham and he can say, when I made the vow, I didn't know what circumstance I'd be facing. Had I known X, Y, Z, I would never have made the vow, and that cancels the vow. That halacha has no source. Next category is what the Mishnah calls mountains hanging from a hair. That is, you have a tremendous amount of halachos, but it's all dependent on a very thin, slim source. Far more halachos than you would have expected from such a tiny source. The things in this category, the Mishnah says, are halachos Shabbos, the halachos of a carbon chagiga, and halachos of me'ilah, that is halachos of taking property away from hekdesh, violating the rules of kedusha. Then the last category in the Mishnah is things that have a real robust source. The Gemara, the Mishnah, that is, refers to this as the gufei haTorah, the volume of the body of the Torah itself. The Gemara, of course, will explain why this is called the body of the Torah and nothing else. But things in this category are the halachos of laws, that's courts, the monetary laws, the halachos of karbanos, the halachos of tumah and tahara, the halachos of arayos, forbidden relationships. Those are the ones that go into this group of robust source for robust halachos. Okay, now the Gemara begins discussing the halacha of a pesach for a neder. That is the rule that you're allowed to get rid of a neder or a vow by asking a chacham, saying that I didn't realize the circumstance that I would be in. So the Gemara says there's no source, but the Gemara quotes a brisa that it has 5 potential sources anyway. Very slim sources, but 5 potential sources. The Gemara will reject pretty much, won't reject fully, but it'll dismiss 4 out of the 5. So out of the 5. So the first 4 are in a brisa. Rabbi Eliezer says the source is from the fact that it says ki yafli, when he will speak. And it says that twice in 2 different contexts. One is referring to when a person takes a vow of Nazirus, and one is referring to when one takes a vow of Erchin. It says Yafli, which means he will speak, he will specify. The extra phrase Yafli doesn't have to repeat it twice. One is to show that there's a speaking of creating a vow, and there's also a speaking of removing a vow. There's a way to speak and remove the vow, and that's when he takes his taina to the chacham to show that he didn't realize what circumstance he would encounter. That's the source of Rabbi Eliezer. The next source is Rabbi Yeshua. He says that the source is from the fact that it says in it, Tehillim Asher Nishbati Ba'api, that I swore in my anger. So you see that he swore it in his anger, but when he calmed down from his anger, he wanted to get rid of it, and therefore he's allowed to get rid of that oath that he took, which was only made in anger. So you can see that you can have regret for an oath that you made and remove it. Third source is Rabbi Yitzchak. He says, like we see in the discussion of donations for the Mishkan in Parshas Truma, it says Kol Nediv Libai, everyone of a generous heart should give. So you see, it's only as long as he has generous heart that he needs to give. If his generosity of his heart fades, he can take it back, or he can cancel his vow, that is, to give in the first place. Fourth source is from a pasuk in Tehillim as well. It says Neshbati v'akayema lishmar mishpatei tzedkacha. I've sworn and I will keep doing the mitzvahs and the rules of your justice. So you see there that we say Nishbati v'akayema, 2 things. I swore it and I will keep it. It's possible to swear and keep. It's possible to swear and to not keep. How could it be possible to swear and to not keep? Must be a way of removing it. Okay, these are the four sources in the Brisa. Now Shmuel the Amira says if I would be there, I would give a source that's better than all of them, because all of them can be challenged. And the source of them all is where it says in Bamidbar, Lo Yachel Devara, he should not violate his words. That is to say, he should not violate his words. He who swore should not violate his words. He cannot make it chulin, cannot make it mundane. However, others can make his words mundane. There are chachamim who can take off the severity of his words and can cancel the vow for him. Now, the Gemara lists what are the challenges for each of the four besides for Shmuel. So the Gemara says, if it was just from the words Yafli repeated like Rabbi Eliezer said, I could challenge that by saying that it's here to teach me a different halacha, and that is when someone vows Naziros, it has to be a clear Naziros, it has to be spelled out, it has to be hafla, it has to be pronounced clearly, and it has to be known. If it's a situation where it's unknown whether that Naziros takes effect or not, then it doesn't take effect, even if later it's revealed that it does. What's the case? Rashi says you have two people that are seated, and someone comes up to them. As he's approaching, one of them says, if that guy's a Nazir, I'm a Nazir too. And the other person seated near him says, if that guy's a Nazir, I'm not a Nazir. If he's not a Nazir, then I am a Nazir. So, one of these two people is a Nazir theoretically, because the person who's approaching them is either a Nazir or not. And one said, I'm a Nazir if he's a Nazir, and one said, I'm a Nazir if he's not a Nazir. Says the Gemara, neither of them become a Nazir because there is no clear Naziros vow at the time that they made it. It's got to be without suffix, and that's learned from the phrase hafla. Now, this is a true halacha. The Gemara says maybe this can be learned out of that word, and therefore, if not for Rabbi Eliezer saying that this is the source for a chacham taking off a vow, I would have rejected it. I would have said that this is not the source for that. Now, the second source we had seen was where it says Asher nishbati biapi, and we said that I swore in my anger, but I'm going to remove it when I'm not angry. So the Gemara says maybe that's not what it means. I would have said that it means I swore in my anger, and now I'm stuck. I have to keep what I swore in my anger. Now the third source that we had seen was where it says Kol nediv libay, anyone of a generous heart. So the Gemara says maybe that's to teach me the halacha that even if a person only decides in his heart to give, he's obligated to give, as opposed to the halacha that Shmuel says that you have to actually say you're going to give to create an obligation to give. But it's nediv liba, it's of a generous heart. And the fourth source that we had seen where it says nishbati v'akayema, that could be just saying that someone could swear to keep a mitzvah, and then he has two mitzvahs. One is the mitzvah that he did, and the other is the fact that he kept the oath that he made. As a matter of fact, perhaps this is teaching me that somebody should do that. You should swear to keep a mitzvah to further encourage yourself to do it. Now, however, Shmuel's source where it says Lo Yachel Devaro, that has no challenge. There's no way to get out of that. It says Rava, or possibly of Nachman bar Yitzchak, this is fulfillment of the expression people use, one good, strong pepper is better than a basket full of squash, because it has strength and it has sharpness to it. And that would be Shmuel as opposed to the other Chacham. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to discuss the halachos of Shabbos. We've finished with Nidarim. Now the Gemara discusses Shabbos. We know that Halachos Shabbos, the Mishnah said, is mountains hanging from a hair. So the Gemara wants to know what halacha are we saying has a very flimsy source. So the Gemara says that's the halacha in Halachos Shabbos of malacha shenitzricha legufa. The case would be where somebody digs a hole, not because he wants a hole, he digs a hole because he needs dirt. Now, making a hole is a malacha doraisa because you are building, it's creating a hole. This person created a hole, but he didn't do it because he wanted the hole. He did it with a different intent. Again, it's not that he did not intend to make the hole. He knew exactly what he was doing. He made the hole. But what he wanted the hole for was not because he wants a hole. He wanted the hole. That was a side effect of what he wanted. He wanted the dirt. That's called malacha shenitzricha legufa. So the Gemara says that fits according to Reb Shimon, who says malacha shenitzricha legufa is pater on Shabbos, and therefore this extra halacha here is that one is not chayav from malacha shenitzricha legufa. What about according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says you're chayav from malacha shenitzricha legufa? The Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda would say that you're pater in this case as well, because here he's actually destroying the field. Making holes is destructive. which is destructive. Rabbi Yehuda agrees one is not chayiv for. So the Gemara says, all right, so that is not really clear anywhere. So that would be a mountain hanging from a hair. But the Gemara says, what's the hair? What is the flimsy source that you do have? I'm not aware of any source. Because the flimsy source is that the Torah links the malachos of Shabbos with the building of the Mishkan, because it says just before it describes the building of the Mishkan in Vayakel, it says to keep Shabbos. And in the building of the Mishkan, it says clearly that it has to be malachas machshavas. It has to be intended, well thought out activities, and therefore that's my source that the malachas of Shabbos you're also only chayiv if you intended to do what you are creating. Okay, now we move on to the next thing in the Mishnah, which was a carbon chagiga. That is a flimsy source. It's also a mountain hanging from a hair. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Chagiga says clearly, the Psukim spell out, it says, V'chaga yisem oisai chaga Hashem. And you should bring a carbon chagiga to Hashem. So the Gemara says, no, maybe that doesn't mean to bring a carbon chagiga. Maybe it just means chag. Chag means to make a yom tov. You should celebrate. Make a holiday. So maybe that's all it means to say. It is not saying anything about karbanos. The Gemara says, that can't be what chagiga means. Because the Torah clearly says that when Moshe Rabbeinu said to Paro, we're going to be Yechoiguli Bamidbar. We are going to do a chag in the desert. So obviously we were planning to go and bring karbanos to Shech. So obviously chag means karbanos. So Gemara says maybe not. Maybe we were just saying we want to go make a yom tov in the midbar. I didn't know there's any chag involved. Gemara says no, that can't be either, because he said you Pari will give us karbanos to do our chag. You agam ata titin b'yadeinu zvachim va'olos. You will give us karbanos. Obviously chag is karbanos. Someone says, no, maybe he wasn't going to give animals for karbanos. Maybe he was going to give animals for meat. We need to make a big celebration. We want to have meat, so he's going to give that. Someone says, okay, so the source is in the fact that it says, Lo yalin chelev chagi ad vekir. Do not leave over the fats of my chag. If chag means a celebration, it doesn't have fats. Obviously, chag means a carbon. Someone says, no, maybe what it means to say is that the karbanos which you bring on a chag, not the chag means karbanos. You're going to make a celebration. That's what chag is. If you bring in karbanos, either for shlamim, to have meat, or whatever a reason, don't leave the chayla fats over until the morning. Gemara says that's wonderful, but that would be a wrong halacha. That would seem to imply that you only have a problem leaving fats over off the mizbech until the morning if it's a carbon that you bring on a yom tov. That's not true. That issur applies all the time, even if it's not on a yom tov. Like it says, kol halayla ad haboker. You should leave it. It should be on the mizbech all night until the morning. So Gemara says, no, but that's only mitzvah saseh. Here it's telling me mitzvahs lo saseh. It says, lo yolin chelev chagei bakar. That's to make a negative commandment. Gemara says, no, I don't need that to make a negative commandment. I have a different pasuk that teaches me the negative commandment not to leave it fats over. It says, v'lo yolin min ha-basar asher tizbach ba'erev. B'yom harishon la boker. Gemara says, okay, that's a true lav. So you have one clear lav, one clear aseh. Maybe this is telling me that there's another lav when it's on a yom tov. Gemara says, okay, you can't argue with that. I'll go back to a different source. I will come up with a different source, and that is the word midbar. It says Yechoiguli Bamidbar, and in Sefer Amos it says Hazach Mincha Higashtam Li Bamidbar. Linking midbar, just like chag connected with midbar, it says Yechoiguli Bamidbar is connected to Zvachim Mincha Higashtam Li Bamidbar, and just like that's talking about Zvachim, Karbanos, chag here is also talking about Karbanos. So Gemara says, so then that's a good source. Why do you call it just hanging by a hair? Sounds like it's hanging from a thick rope. Gemara says, no, because you don't learn halachos usually generally from Nevi'im. You learn a Torah from Torah. Here you have a Torah halacha based off Navi, that's called hanging from a hair. Alright, now the Gemara moves on to the next, the final member of the group of halachos hanging a mountain from a hair. And that's Me'ilah, the halacha that if you use the property of hektish, you violate the issur me'ilah, and one needs to bring a carbon for that and other procedures. So Gemara says, why is it called hang from here? Gemara says because there's one surprising halacha there, and that's that there's no concept of ein shliach l'dvar avera. Generally, we have a rule: if you make somebody your shliach, you make someone your messenger to go do something which is forbidden, he can't claim that it's your fault you sent me. He shouldn't have listened to you. The fact that he listened to you is his own responsibility. Here, though, in the case of somebody who sends someone to do me'ilah, and Rashi explains the cases where he had a pile of money and he mixed me'ilah money into his own money, and he told the shliach, go take the money and please purchase for me coat or something. The shliach went and he bought the coat. So here, the sender violates the Isser. The Avera goes on the sender. He has to bring the carbon Me'ilah. He's the one who is considered to have all halachas of Me'ilah applying to him. That's a violation of the general principle of En Shiach L'Dvar Avera. That's a surprising halacha, and that's the mountain that's hanging by a hair. So Gemara has a question on this. Gemara says, why do you call it the mountain that's hanging on a hair? There is a specific source for this. And that's a link between the halachas of Me'ilah and the halachas of Truma. They each have the word chet involved. That links the two. And Truma, we have clear statements that you're allowed to make a shliach to go take Truma for you. Therefore, you should also have a clear statement here that you can make a shliach to go take Me'ilah for you. And therefore, you are considered to be the sender. He takes Me'ilah, you're considered to be the sender. Just like in Truma, you're considered to be the sender and you fulfill the mitzvah of Truma if your shliach takes it for you. Here also, you're considered to have performed the Avera of Me'ilah if your shliach goes and separates or spends Me'ilah for you. So Gemara says, okay, so you have a source for that. So that couldn't be it then. The Gemara now tries again with a different halacha, very similar halacha, but a different halacha, and that's what happens if in the case we said earlier, where the owner sends a shliach to take his money, which includes a me'ilah, and go buy something. After the shliach left, he only realizes, oh, that was me'ilah money. So the owner now cancels the shlichus. He mentally says, okay, I don't want him to do it for me. Then the shliach though keeps going because he is not aware that he was canceled, but now he's acting on his own. So there, the shliach violates the Isser Me'ilah and not the sender. So Gemara says, okay, the sender canceled. Why is it the shliach's fault? What was he supposed to do? That's the halach hanging from here. So the Gemara asks on this also. The Gemara says, no, he goes and he spends Me'ilah money by accident. Well, guess what? Every carbon Me'ilah is brought when he spends Me'ilah money by accident. Somebody who violates Me'ilah and spends hektish money on purpose doesn't get to bring a carbon Me'ilah. So this is a mistake. It's a shogeg, just like every other Me'ilah is a shogeg. Gemara says, okay, we'll have to give you a different source, a different halacha, which is the one that's hanging from here. And that's the following dichotomy that we find. Somebody who takes property from hectares, let's say he takes a beam or a stone. So as soon as he picks it up and he walks out with it, you would think that he violates Me'ilah, but he doesn't. If he gives it to somebody else, then he violates Me'ilah. Why should that be? As soon as he picks it up, he's taken away from hectares, he should violate Me'ilah right then. So that's the halacha that's hanging from here. So Gemara says, why do you say that? Maybe we're talking about a specific case here. Maybe the person we're referring to is a worker for hektish. He's the gizbar, and he's responsible to manage hektish material. As soon as he picks it up, he hasn't done anything wrong because he's supposed to be picking it up and taking it places. He's the one who's going to spend it for hektish. When he goes and gives it to someone else, then he's stolen from hektish. That's why he's responsible for it then and not earlier. Gemara says, okay, we'll try a different case. Again, similar but a different case. Somebody takes hektish materials and builds it into his house. The halacha is, as soon as he builds it into his house, he's not violating Me'ilah, he's not doing Me'ilah. However, once he lives under or uses that construction material in the house, now he violates Me'ilah. So why should that be? As soon as he builds it into his house, he's already stolen it from hektish, he's taken it away. He's changed it, and it's now part of his house. Should violate Me'ilah with that. Someone says, no, we're talking about a case, perhaps, where he just put it on top of a skylight. He had a hole in the ceiling, and he covered the hole. Didn't build it, didn't attach it, didn't do anything wrong. As soon as he lives under that hole, now he's benefiting from the hektish material. That's where he violates the Isser of Me'ilah. So the Gemara says, okay, I'll accept that. That also cannot be the halacha that's hanging from here. The Gemara, therefore, goes back to our previous explanation that the halacha that's called hanging from a hair is where the shliach was cancelled, and he continues anyway, and we say he violates Me'ilah. So the Gemara had asked that shouldn't be any different than any other shogeg. Me'ilah is always a shogeg. The Gemara says no. Generally, we hold him somewhat responsible if he b'shogeg spends Me'ilah funds, because he should have paid attention to what money he has and what money he's using. Here, though, he's completely unknown. He's a shliach. The money belongs to the person who sent him. The person who sent him is the only one who had any information that there was Me'ilah money mixed in here, and then he went and canceled him. What's this guy supposed to know? He wasn't supposed to do anything. I would have thought that this is an ones. The halacha that's hanging from here is that he doesn't count as an ones, and he is held responsible for it like Me'ilah.